What's happening, gang? Back live, ESPN Radio Studios, Thursday at 10 every week. It's time for some truth. I'm your host, Jesse Ibanez, getting back into my esteemed panel of truth proctologists. That doesn't even really work that well. Talking, of course, about, we'll call them the best of 2015, which that is definitely very true. And Alejandra Rodriguez and Joel Carvaya. Alex, I left off with you on this because, I mean, I love that frame that you started off with. We're talking about, creating trust that actually work, right? And so you and I are bumping into all these problems with our private business, helping folks get into and out of home. I'm calling Alex like once a week, like, fix this, fix that. Like, there's just, you'd think that just having an estate plan in place and a trust would be enough. And unfortunately, there's a ton of gap maintenance that still has to be addressed. So I wanted to get Alex in and talk about what's wrong with people's trusts. And you had mentioned a fantastic frame around legacy-based approach in the first segment. If you missed that, by the way, go back over into Truth Radio over on Facebook and catch the rebroadcast. The context of legacy is a perfect parlay into how you can sort of inculcate your story into your actual estate plan. And that might sound a little far out there, a little like patchouli oil and fluffy for a lot of folks. But you brought an amazing awareness to me about that. So can you share a little bit more about that and why that's a big part of your approach? Right.
So going back to that original question of like, well, what's wrong with maybe more traditional estate plans? I think one of the main things is our focus on just transferring assets. Let's transfer the home. Let's transfer the money. And that really takes away from who you are and the type of memory that maybe you want to leave for your family and for your kids and your grandchildren. And one way of ensuring that you're able to pass on more than just those assets is by what I offer to clients is an ability to like record themselves answering. I either provide them with a sets of questions that they can choose from, or they can, do it themselves. They can say, this is what I want to talk about. And let me kind of couch it with like two examples. One example was back in the 90s when my grandmother was alive. And my mom, so my grandmother was, she didn't speak or read English, and she didn't really know how to write either. And so my mom wanted to make sure that she was able to memorialize her memories and her life story, because my grandmother was private and wasn't really one to just talk nonstop. And so my mom really was kind of like pulling teeth trying to get that information from her. And so she basically would interview my grandmother. It was just one-on-one, her and my mom. And she would write down the story, and then she transcribed it. She typed it up and put it into these family albums that she created for each member of our family. And as part of that, it not only included my grandmother's life story, but it also had like family pictures. It had her recipes, because my grandmother loved to cook. It was like agua para chocolate, like that. That's how she showed her love, is like through her food. And so having all of the recipes and putting them all into this album that she passed out for Christmas one year. And that was amazing. And so just having that was the biggest gift that my grandmother could give all of us. And now that my grandmother has passed, we have that, and every year we pull it out and we're able to read it. And, if we want to make the cookies she used to make for the holidays, we have that recipe there. So that, I think, is a really perfect example of the type of non-tangible asset that you can pass on to your family. And, we probably don't have the time to do that. And, I'm sure there's companies that would do that for you, and they're going to charge you lots of money for that. But I offer clients that opportunity. Well, why not, after we're done transferring, making sure that all of the tangible assets are transferred, why not come in and I'm going to record you and your family telling whatever it is you want them to know, whether it's like, what you learned in business. These are the things that, you need to keep in mind. Or if you're an entrepreneur and you want to instill those types of values in your kids, or even just family values, relationship values. This is the type of spouse you should be for your partner. And then kind of couching it on the other side of a more present day example. Last year, my boyfriend's mom turned 85, and her family basically hired a videographer. So she's still alive, and they've hired a videographer for her 85th birthday. And they had their mom tell her life story because she was an orphan, and she went from being an orphan to getting married and having 9 kids and a gazillion great-grandchildren. And they put it on CDs and passed it out to all of the family members for her 85th birthday bash. And that was like the biggest gift that their mom could give to them. And so again, that's something they're going to always have. And so it's that same concept of why not focus on some of the other things that are probably more meaningful, right?
You know what comes up for me is, and literally like a lightning bolt, is the concept of wealth. You know, and I think you framed it perfectly in the beginning. Like you sort of, so the trust is an instrument to be able to carry wealth from one generation to another, right?
Right.
As efficiently and as effectively as possible. Okay. And the majority of that, you know, so we don't have to get probate involved, and you know they take the big piece and all that stuff too. But what's also true is it's almost like you've got a big SUV and you're on your way as a family to Disneyland, you know, and you got a bunch of empty seats in the back. It's like, why not bring grandma along? You know, why not throw grandpa in one of those things? Because that car is analogous to the wealth of your family.
Right.
You know, and the asset is the big SUV. It's like, yeah, you're accomplishing the things on the front end that you know you're supposed to have. But while they're in the vehicle already, transfer the rest of the wealth too.
Right.
I love that thought.
Right. No, I agree. And there was I'm probably going to mess this up, but there was a colleague who, he gave this really funny analogy where he said, you don't, so he was asking someone like, do you remember who the name of your great-great-grandfather is? And the client asked or answered, no, I don't. And they're like, well, you would have if he was a Rockefeller, right? So like, it's kind of like that thing, like if you want to leave a legacy, and I'm not saying it has to be wealth, but whatever it is, you know, the family stories that are passed down generation to generation where it's like you're not forgotten, like you have to put those in place now. And it doesn't just mean that you have, like I said, it doesn't just mean on the wealth, although that was like, I think a kind of a good way to bring it home, where if you don't plan ahead to make sure that that wealth or whatever small amount that you're able to save up is able to last as long as possible, most likely it's going to be gone, you know, within that next generation. So there are ways to try to make a lasting legacy for your family.
Yeah, I love that thought. And what's true for me is I think about the fact, I lost my mom when I was really young. I was 14, and it was kind of an interesting family dynamic. You know, my dad battled with a bunch of stuff. And so I kind of felt like I was really on my own from a pretty early age. And it wasn't until recently as like I kind of like got all grown up, you know, this is me grown up, Joel. This is my grown up version of myself. So apologies in advance. But my dad's sister is like one of the last like family members that we have still from that whole generation that's still like alive. And I felt myself starving for family information, you know, like trying to go back, and then kind of doing the same thing with like my mom's sister who's still here and stuff. And it's like, and it's cool. Like, I'm really grateful that I have that, but it's kind of like the telephone game, you know,
right?
It's a 1 degree of separation, and it's not quite coming from the immediate source. And it's like, oh, I think I remember how that happened. And you guys know, you know, the power of eyewitness testimony being absolutely ironclad and perfect every time, right?
We wish.
You know, that's your domain.
Right.
So I love that thought, you know, and I mean, what else can you share with me about that?
Right. So that's, you know, like you said in the beginning, like sometimes maybe clients think like, oh, that's too like new agey, that's too patchouli feeling. I'm not going to do that. And it is optional, but lately I have been asking clients like, okay, well, you know, you're just coming in anyway, and we're going to do it anyway. And the crazy thing is that I think once clients are going through that process, it's cathartic, right? Like you realize like, oh yeah, it's not this crazy new age, like touchy feely thing. That's really just it's one way of sharing the oral tradition, right? Where like, especially I think like with Native American cultures, like is that storytelling aspect. So this is basically just a way to tell your story, whatever it is that means, you know, something to you. And I think for a lot of parents, especially when their kids are minors, and, you know, I know you have 2 young ones at home, it's God forbid if something were to happen to them yesterday and maybe they didn't get around to really telling or being able to commemorate some way the information they want to pass on to their kids, right? And if it was too late to do that, if you could go back in time, what would you tell them? And so that's kind of like the purpose of these, I call them the legacy interview, right? So again, based on that whole legacy concept.
Yeah. Well, we're homo neurons, right? I mean, that's how it's always been done. We've transferred information through story form.
Right.
I guess the only separation is just the medium, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
so what medium do you suggest? Is it literally like an interview thing where you write it down, or do you like videotape them, or like how does it work?
So I do videotape them. So I have a little camera and I sit them down in front of me. And like I said, oftentimes clients don't really know what it is they want to be telling their loved ones. And so I have sets of questions that they can choose from. And so I ask them the question and I record them as they're telling it. And, I'm not going to lie, sometimes there are tears that are being shed as they're speaking, because I don't think you quite fully realize that experience until you're going through it, when you're thinking about it.
Yeah.
So it is recorded. And then what I do is I put it on a CD. And so you're able to take that, and that's part of your plan, right? You put it in your trust binder, and that's not just the physical things that you're transferring, you're also transferring like your story. Another option for clients that maybe don't, for whatever reason, don't feel comfortable doing that would be even just to write like a love letter to your family. And that's, you could, and it can take many different forms, whether you're saying like, this is what I want to have happen for, the type of celebration I want upon my death, and saying the things, putting all that in writing. Or even if you were to say, these are the things I want to tell you, if I never get that chance to say it again, I love you and I want you to do well, and whatever form that takes. So, I mean, there's many different ways to transfer that, but the one that I use is a video.
And you're going to have an opportunity to, I think, kind of play this out at its length. Are you not? Did you not tell me about a workshop you're actually doing in South Park this weekend?
I am, yeah. So on Saturday in South Park at 1:30, I'm doing a free workshop for parents, and it's a workshop where parents are going to be able to name a legal guardian for their children. So by the end of the workshop, it's just an hour workshop. By the end of the workshop, you're going to actually leave with a document making sure that you've named a legal guardian. So if you don't have anything in place right now, then that's really at the very least something you should have. And I try to make it as easy as possible.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
I love that. Keep it out of the courts as best as possible.
That's right.
How do they get information about attending that workshop?
So they could either go to my website at rodriguezlawoffices.com, and or even just on Eventbrite, they can just search for naming guardian workshop, and it'll pop up there.
Free of charge?
It is. It's free of
Awesome.
charge.
Love you for that. Alejandra Rodriguez, gang. And by the way, if you missed that, you can catch her at rodriguezlawoffices.com. And your phone number is?
619-238-5270.
I think that officially puts you out of the hot seat, Alex.
Yeah.
You told us some truth.
I
and I
did.
definitely appreciate that, gang. So we're going to keep this rolling coming up. And actually, Joel, this is ESPN, right? So we got to get them caught up on our CBS Sports Minute. And I believe Boomer Esiason's going to get us all smart and stuff about the San Diego stadium deal. So I'm excited, actually, to hear about that. And then on the backside of this, we're going to get all warm and snuggly with Joel and Cravaya. We're going to get into real estate neighbor disputes. And we're going to be hugging when we talk about bad fences and good neighbors. Right after this.